Welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 27. And this week, as you might notice from a sort of slight change of the surrounds, it's a Spring Fling special. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Spring Fling, what it is for those who don't know, how I've been involved with it over several years, pretty much the past decade, and a special workshop that I'm going to be running later in the week for absolutely anybody to take part. You don't have to live locally, and I'll give you more information about that. Spring Fling is pretty much the main thrust of tonight. And then, of course, in the second half, I'll be giving critique and feedback on various pictures that have been submitted during the week to the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group. So, amongst those, let me just flick that over there and where do we go? Okay, yeah, so there's a picture that's been used for advertising some of the Spring Fling stuff, which pretty much shows you the setup that I've got. If you were sitting over my shoulder just about here, this is more or less what it would look like. We've got the webcam, we've got my setup, couple of pictures up on the walls. So there you go. If you ever wanted to know what a behind the scenes of Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres was actually like, this is it. The only extra bit here is, in order to take this photo, I had it tethered to my tablet, so I was remote triggering it from the tablet there, so you can see my finger pressing it in order to take the photo, which is then taking the photo, which is then taking the photo, and at that point the resolution runs out, but gives you a sense of what's going on. Also, we'll be looking at Mandy has taken this picture, and she has a question about this house up on the right hand corner, which, you know, she's not sure whether she should leave in or not. Spring Fling, like I say, as well as it being on this week, and I know it's not spring, but I will talk about that afterwards. I've been involved in it for several years, and one particular year I did a theme called I'm Humphrey Bogart and so's my wife, and so that was one of my key pictures from that, so that will be cropping up. What else have we got? Paul took a couple of photos. These were of street musicians in particular, was wanting to get some feedback on that. Alison took this photo in Tuscany, doesn't quite feel the balance is right, and was looking for a bit of feedback. And Fiji was playing around with a little bit of Photoshop, sticking some boats in behind a bridge. She knows that it didn't work particularly well, but is sort of wanting to sort of get a couple of ideas of where she could go next with it. So that's what we've got coming up. Let's flick back. Now, the other thing is, of course, Facebook. We're going live out on Facebook, unless you happen to be watching the recording, in which case I record these afterwards and they go up onto YouTube, and you can go to youtube.com/Kim Ayres, and you can find all the previous episodes of Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, the podcast. Yes, Facebook Live. Comments, please comment, leave comments, let me know you're here already. In fact, I think just before I flipped over, I saw one from Pat saying, next time you come down, wear the hat. Got a thing for trilbies, have you, Pat? Stacey says, hello, good afternoon from Hatboro, Pennsylvania. Hi, Stacey, glad you could make it along. Maggie, my wife, hello, everyone. Hi. And Stacey's back in with good afternoon, Maggie. So that's great stuff. Leave your comments. Let me know you're here. If it's your first time here as well, let me know where you're from as well, because it's always interesting to know. Because I've, people come in from different corners of the world. I mean, there's Stacey from Pennsylvania, Pat's from way down south of England, and Maggie's from the kitchen next door. So we've got quite a spread already. Right. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about Spring Fling first. And in essence, Spring Fling is an open studios event. And basically what that means is that I can't remember the exact year it started up, but we're looking at coming up to probably close to 20 years ago. somewhere between 15, 20 years ago. Spring Fling started up as a group of artists decided to open up their studios and create for a weekend. It's called Spring Fling because it was the final weekend in May. Last weekend in May is when Spring Fling has nearly always gone out. And essentially what happens is a trail was made up. You could go around, you could visit the artist studios, get to meet the artists directly, see them at the work, buy from them. And it was, quite a bit of fun. And each year on year, it's grown and grown and grown. And there are people who, from all around the country, indeed different places around the world, who have been setting aside, their holiday time specifically to come to this little corner of southwest Scotland to meet artists and buy directly from them. And it's quite an event. Shortly after we moved here, about 2 years after we moved here, it was in 2005, so sometime around, I can't remember exactly again, 2007, 2008, my wife joined Spring Fling, and she's an artist, and so she took part in it, and then the following year, and then at this point, by the time we got to 2010-ish, I'd set up myself as a photographer. But I was trying to do things a little bit differently with my photos, and so rather than just being a kind of standard portrait wedding photographer kind of thing, I was getting a bit more arty with it, a bit more conceptual with it. So I decided to go for Spring Fling as well, and my first Spring Fling was in 2011, I think. Yes. So that's the point I got involved. So my very first Spring Fling, my little studio here, it was a studio then because I would fit people into it. It's a study now because there's not enough. I've got so many shelves and units and stuff crammed into here. I just don't use it as a studio anymore. There's not enough space. Well, on occasion I'll do the occasional headshot where you're only needing something this wide, so I can do a quick sort of little backdrop and nobody knows the difference, but I can't do proper photo shoots here. Photo shoots always now happen out on location, so I don't have a studio as such. Back then though, there was just enough room to sort of do full length bodies if I squeezed myself back against the far wall and they were sort of against the far wall. And my first, my initial pitch to Spring Fling, because the thing is Spring Fling is a selected thing. You don't get in automatically. You have to apply for it, and you can get knocked back. You can for any number of reasons. So there's no guarantee you can get into it. Anyway, I applied. I managed to get in because what I decided to do was I would create a little event. That in essence, when anybody who came round to my studio, I would take that photo and pin it to the wall. And at the end of the weekend, we'd sort of see how many pictures we'd got, sort of sitting around the walls of. So, at the time, let me just show you, where are we? Which one to do first? So, well, okay, let's flick over to here. This was taken at the end of the weekend. It's in this room where you saw me in that last picture. I was over in this corner, back over behind my shoulder. There's a lot more space in the room back then. And here you can see a whole bunch of photos stuck to the wall. As the weekend went on, what happened is you can see down here on my left, there's a laptop. I tethered the camera to the laptop, and then across from where I am, or from your direction across that way, I then had a little setup. So that's sort of close up for what it looked like, all these faces. And here was my setup. So the setup was very, very basic. Basically, I had a chair, I had a backdrop, I had a window, and I had a reflector. Now, this was my early days in photography. I'd literally only decided to call myself a photographer the year before. And so those who've sort of been following these podcasts regularly, I've talked about how light sort of came in at a later date. So I started off natural light photographer because I didn't have any lights. So I just had to make use of natural light. As time went on, I then got myself some continuous lights to sort of light up, because the problem is that natural light is there's not enough of it most of the time, especially when you live in Scotland. You're very limited on the number of daylight hours and the number of days when it's not cloudy or overcast or pouring with rain. And if you're indoors, you're totally reliant on windows and the window being big enough. And then eventually I got into using flashes, off-camera flashes, strobes and the like. Now, with this particular photo, at this point I hadn't got any lights, but I was using the window light coming from one side, and then I had a reflector on the other side to bounce the light back. So if you, let's randomly zoom in on one of these photos, what you can see is the person is mostly lit from the right, and then there's a little bit of light bouncing back from the reflector and just filling in some of the shadows. You can see it sort of slightly over a bit more here. Some faces picked up the light a bit more. But it meant that I'd started to learn the idea of layers of light. I'd already been doing side lighting, so your light, shadow, light. It was an interesting way of doing it. But like I said, I didn't have artificial lights, so it was a case of using window light and then a reflector to bounce some of that light back. So that was the studio, and then here's another angle. If we go back, if you stood in the doorway there and looked back now, this is wide angle lens on it, so it looks bigger than it is. It really is quite a small space, this. You can now see the corner where I sat on the chair here and photographed them over my shoulder. You can see the window over here. Got a couple of little tables set up on the right where people could leave comments or sign a model release form to say it was okay for me to have the pictures up, and hand out Spring Fling brochures and give them any bits of extra information they thought they might need. And I had my friend, I think it was this first one, I had my son Rogan helped me out with this. And what he did was, while I was taking the photos, he acted as a kind of meet and greet, told people what was going on. It got anybody who was interested in taking part to scribble down a signature, an email address, and then we did this. And then I did a cursory, a week. If anybody actually wanted the photo for 10 quid, I'd email it to them. It wasn't really about making money. It was just about creating a bit of an event for it. So that was, and that's it from another angle. Gives you a slightly better idea of the width of the room now. Again, so you can see down here, this little bookcase here is literally the one behind me here. So this is my room, this is the space. Now, so that, where are we at? Okay, so that was 2011. Now, last week I was talking about Wigtown Book Festival because, excuse me, on the back of this, I applied to be artist in residence at Wigtown Book Festival, and I took a similar idea, which was basically that I was going to get everybody to stare into the camera. I was going to take photos of authors, of visitors to Wigtown Book Festival, of locals. The difference with this one was that I'd noticed when I've been taking photos here, a lot of the fun had been when actually people didn't smile. Most people smile, but every now and again somebody wouldn't, or I'd either ask them not to, or we play a character or something like that. And I found those photos an awful lot more interesting. So I decided to take that idea, and then everything I was talking about last week at Wigtown Book Festival was then I created. The studio space I had was a little bit bigger than this, and I ended up taking 173 photos of people not smiling into the camera. Alongside that, I also got everybody to give me the name of a well-loved book, which I wrote next to which I've scribbled in pen under the. I put their name and the well-loved book on each photo that I put up, because sometimes what would happen is you'd look at a photo, you form an opinion of the person, but when you saw the book that they loved, you sometimes change your opinion on it, or reinforce your opinion on your first kind of judgment of what they might be like, and that was a kind of fun thing to do. Now, the Wigtown Book Festival Artist in Residency was sponsored by Spring Fling, or work, it was a cross work with Spring Fling. So it automatically meant that by getting that, I was in Spring Fling for 2012. And during 2012, I went back to Wigtown and back to, even though the festival had happened at the end of September, beginning of August, I was back there the following May. Back in this room again, which I was talking about last week, where again you can see I've got the same kind of setup. I've got a laptop, chair, only this time I'm shooting this way. And also at this point, I've now got lights. I've got a continuous light, which I'm bouncing through an umbrella, but you can see the same thing. I've got a reflector on the other side. Whilst there is a window there wasn't much light coming through the window, and of course obviously it was no good on for evenings or dull days. So that was the setup that I had then for Wigtown Book Festival. So that was 2012. 2013, I applied again, and I thought, well, what am I going to do this time? I wanted to do something a little bit different. I was still very much doing headshots. But I thought, well, let's have a bit of fun dressing up. And I decided I was going to, the idea, and to this day, I cannot remember exactly where the idea came from. But the idea became, I'm Humphrey Bogart, and so's my wife. Now, what we have, let's just show you, there's a kind of traditional photo, Humphrey Bogart, 1940s, 1950s film star, trench coat, trilby. Iconic. There's another one, that kind of thing. And so what I did was I got my friend Alice, who she always loves dressing up. And she also likes sort of playing with androgyny as well, where, and sort of bits of cross-dressing and having fun with that. And so she was the perfect person to act as my Humphrey Bogart. And by this time, I'd managed to get hold of a trench coat, and I got hold of a trilby. And I invited her around, and I set up a wee black backdrop in the studio and played around with different lighting until I felt that I got something like a kind of Hollywood lighting system going. And it's actually not too dissimilar from the setup that I had originally, which is you've got a main light coming from one side and you've got a bounce light from the other side. Only in this case, it wasn't a bounce light, it was an actual light. So I've got two full light sources for this photo. Playing around with the shadow, having the collar up, the angles. So it was taking that idea of Humphrey Bogart, the idea of I'm Humphrey Bogart and so's my wife. Slight little play on, for those of you who've seen The Life of Brian, the Monty Python film, there's a big crucifixion scene at the end where Brian is on the cross, and then orders have come to release him, and the centurion comes up and says, I've orders here to release Brian. Brian himself is too busy distracted with something else, and somebody else says, I'm Brian. And then he turns around and goes, what? No, I'm Brian. And then somebody else goes, no, I'm Brian. And everybody's calling it out. And then there's somebody yells out, I'm Brian, and so's my wife, because they're trying to get off. So it's funnier if you watch it on the film. But that little phrase, I'm Brian, and so's my wife. And I thought the thing is with the Humphrey Bogart thing is if it's just Humphrey Bogart, the fact is there's a high number of, it's split sex, gender, there's no limitation. It was just a case of you're going to stick on a hat and a coat. So it just seemed like a kind of fun idea. So what I would do is I would take photos of Humphrey Bogarts and stick them around the walls. So let's close a few of those for the moment. And where was I? Yeah, so now basically, but instead of having a black background, I set up a white background, because I suddenly realised if I was going to be printing all these out, it was going to go use an awful lot of ink if I had a black background. So I will run you through some of these. So people came along, and I stuck, at this point what I've got is I've got the window light is what's coming in from their right, and then I've got a studio light coming from the left, which is creating the bright white of the background. It's also whitening out the wall behind as well. Now, these shots were taken in just a few seconds. I mean, people would sit down, I would chat to them, and talk to them about, we'd sort of do a little bit of adjustment of hat and coat, and then I'd tell them to sort of give me their best Humphrey Bogart, look straight into the camera, and then I go click, 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 3 clicks most, well, generally speaking, on average click, just take a look through, see which one worked, and that would be it. Very occasionally I would do another one if it turned out they were blinking in all of them or something, or they were particularly unhappy. But it was a fast turnaround thing. The main thing was it was about the volume. And so male, female, we started getting young, old. Also, our youngest was about 2 years old. I think, where was she? Yeah, our oldest, I think, was she 90, 91, something like that. So not far off 9 decades separating the oldest from the youngest. And I'll just keep my finger on this and you can see all these different Humphrey Bogarts we had. Who knows, you might even recognise someone. Having said that, these are all sort of, 7, 8 years old now. So, and in the end, I photographed, I think it was 127 Humphrey Bogarts in total, all stuck around the walls. And I think that should just, yep, there we go, just coming to the end there. And where do we go? So, boom, boom, boom. Again, here was the setup. See a colour photo now of the room. The day before, I took a couple of photos, test photos, which I put up on the wall just to get started. But you can see the familiar laptop. There's a printer sitting behind, ready to print them out. There's the coat and hat that was going to be used. And then I went click, 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 click around the walls. So you can now see what it looked like with 127 Bogarts on them. And then at the end of it, I stuck the hat and coat on myself, stood there, took a photo. And that's the one I showed you at the beginning. So that was a sort of fun, a really fun kind of thing to do. However, whilst I got a lot of publicity from it, a lot of goodwill from it, even last year I met up with somebody who was talking about, fond memories of the Humphrey Bogart shoot and wondering if I was going to do something similar again. It played against me. Following that Spring Fling, I got numerous phone calls from people who thought essentially I was a photo booth photographer. Because I'd been, like the first time, just, well, if you want it, for 10 quid, I'll email you the image, because it wasn't really about making money. It was about creating an event and having all these pictures on the walls. A lot of people seem to think that I would only be charging £10 for a photo shoot. And it would all be about, a quick kind of dressing up box. Somebody would shove something on, I'd take a quick photo, and then they'd only pay a tenner. And I didn't realise just how much that had messed up my reputation in a way. I thought I was doing something fun and exciting. And in my mind, it was about exploring the idea that you didn't have to have ordinary portraits. You could play around with storytelling. But it was a real eye-opener to me about the danger that can happen sometimes, that you can get stuck in people's heads for doing the wrong thing. So the following year, I decided what I would just straightforwardly do would be have, I wouldn't do any photo shoots. I would just stick pictures on the walls. People could come round and I would talk to them about that. So here's, pretty much exactly the same position. Only now I've moved on to, this is 2014. I'm now using flashes, so I've got one behind me. I think I've got another one bouncing off the window. I think this was taken at night time, and I turned it and faced it at the window. So the main light that's lighting me up is reflected, bounced off the window. And then I've got another one behind, sitting over on the bookshelf behind me to just give me a little bit of backlight and light up other parts of the room. By this time, I've now got into the whole narrative photography thing, where I'm, really exploring stories, set pieces, dramatic photos. I've been printing them up, sticking them. These are all printed A2 size. Underneath, I've put other photos from the shoot, and there's explanations. And I would talk people through. They would come around, and I would talk them through what I was up to. And that was okay. But what tended to happen there was people would chat, and they go, "Oh, very nice. Maybe one day I'll do that." And then they wandered off, and I wouldn't see them again. And it was most of the people that I got coming around were other photographers, which was fine. I was always happy to chat to the photographers. But I didn't seem to get many people who wanted to do that kind of photography with me. So that was, yeah. There's that lovely phrase, I'm sure I've used it before, which is experience is something you gain immediately after you needed it the most. And each year was more experience. So the next year, for 2015, I thought, right, I'm going to go back to doing a demonstration, but I'm going to do some kind of lighting demonstration. But to do this now, I'm going to need a bigger space. So this time round, after a bit of asking about, it turned out there was what used to be a church, St. John's Church, I think it was, down at the bottom part of Castle Douglas, which had been deconsecrated and was done up and was being used as a wedding venue as much as anything else. But basically it was a big space that you could hire out, and they were quite happy for me to use the space because it meant there would be quite a bit of footfall coming through, and it essentially helped advertise the fact that they were using the space. And then I shared, because it was a huge hall, church-sized place, somebody else had another Spring Fling person down at the other end, so we sort of managed to both use the same venue. So up at one end, I decided to sort of set up a set, and this then was the set. Now here we've got Maria, friend's daughter. She was my assistant for the weekend, and what I did here was I did a demonstration. So again, I've got the camera hooked up to the laptop, but now I've got the laptop hooked up to a slightly larger screen, so people standing back, when I go click, everybody can see what's on the screen. And what I did was I showed how light changed, how you could modify the light. So I've got a flash, but then I put it through different things. So over here I've got strips of paper or strips cut out, which would give you a bit like a sort of striped effect across the page. Or I've got over here a piece of sort of net curtain, which would soften it. Over here I've got a giant softbox, which diffuses the light, and actually you can sort of even see from this here, it gives a beautiful creamy light. Prop, as you can see, the hat and the coat made its way back in. And in fact, actually, I will just show you. I've got a little, it's only a 1 minute video. It's a little time lapse. My friend Alan lent me his camera, which had a time lapse thing on it, and you can see. So you can see up at the far end there. That was, where I have my setup. You've got all these people kind of coming in. I've got pictures running down the side as well, so I'm sitting out on frames so that I can talk people through what's going on. Table there with all the bits and pieces. People can pick up postcards, Spring Fling paraphernalia. I can sit there having my lunch. And then here's pictures of there's me doing a photo shoot with Maria. And then talking people through the different pictures. So, that was quite fun. It was nice having more space, except for the fact that actually, to be honest, I ended up exhausted with it. Let's close that. The week before this particular Spring Fling happened, I managed to break my camera. And Now, fortunately, after a mad panic and realising that I wasn't going to be able to get it repaired in time, I had a couple of friends come offer me their cameras and what have you. Particularly Andy Jardine was an absolute star. He had exactly the same make and model of camera that I was used to using. He lent me it for the weekend. Couldn't thank him enough, and allowed me to get through with it. But what with the breaking of the camera, there was a lot of other stress going on at the time. I found that this particular Spring Fling I just didn't enjoy as much. All the others, whilst there's always a level of nervousness and you're charging around like a mad person trying to get everything organised, and it's absolutely exhausting. But there was always an excitement and a fun, because you're getting to meet people, and I enjoy meeting people. But this time, the fun wasn't there. Only the exhaustion and the energy loss. And now that particular year, my wife took the year out. She just decided to have a break from Spring Fling. Now, the following few years, she then rejoined it the following year. But when it came to renew applications, I couldn't think of anything particularly new to do. And I felt exhausted with it. And I thought, right, I'm just going to take the week off, take a year off from Spring Fling. I won't get involved in 2016. So in 2016 instead, me and my daughter Meg, we just went round visiting we spent the weekend going round the trail and visiting other artists and seeing what was out there, catching up with some people we know, going and visiting places, other artists that we'd not come across before. And it was brilliant. It was so much fun. So much fun that in 2017 we did the same thing, and in 2018 we did the same thing. And I thought, well, okay, and at that point I really wasn't sure whether I was going to sort of go back to Spring Fling or not. It was really so much fun going round visiting all the studios. Part of the problem was I was never really sure whether it was my audience or not. The main thing with Spring Fling was Spring Fling is really good for a lot of people. They go round to buy stuff. I mean, beautifully crafted, handmade, artistic stuff, but they're going around to buy something. And so with that, they, so you go, you meet the artist, you can buy a willow basket, you can buy a beautifully handmade glass ornament, or you can buy some pottery, you can buy a painting, all these kind of things. And you sort of leave with it tucked under your arm, having bought it directly from the artist, spoken to the artists themselves, built a relationship with the artist, and it's a wonderful thing to do that. But with me, because nobody was sort of leaving with a picture, it was a nice demonstration, an interesting thing, but then they'd sort of leave me, go off to another studio, and then completely forget that I was there. There was this idea, well, I'll do it one day, but then out of sight, out of mind. So I figured at this point that, well, maybe it wasn't worth going back to. Anyway, but then what happened was, at the end of 2018, I suddenly had I can't remember, one of these, it was an idea which I suddenly thought maybe I could apply this. And so what I decided to do was I thought, well, okay, what if I did something like, you could have £100 voucher to put towards a Kim Ayres photo shoot for £10 if you come along to Spring Fling. And then what that would do is it would, if nobody was interested in it, then it would show me that basically Spring Fling wasn't my audience. They might be really lovely people, but they weren't there to be interested in photography. However, if loads of people went for it, then I'd know that there was a market for it. Basically the idea of, if a £100 voucher to put towards a photo shoot. Now, there were other terms and conditions, like you only allow one per photo shoot. It had to be a minimum of a £300 photo shoot, and a lot of these could be anything from £500 to £1,500 to beyond. But if a £100 voucher for £10 wasn't going to get you interested, then you weren't my customer. You never were. You might dream of it, you might think that one day you're going to do it, but you're never really going to get round to doing it. And that's fine. But I don't expect you, any business you run doesn't have everybody as customers. What you're trying to do is find your particular customers, the ones who resonate with you. And I just needed to see whether the people coming around Spring Fling were the one, would they ever sort of pick up on that? So I decided to go back into Spring Fling. And this time I couldn't get hold of that hall, but I was asking around. My friends Carolyn and Ken, Ken had a big birthday and a big birthday celebration. And they've got an outbuilding, it's a sort of converted barn basically. And it's the size of a small village hall. Ken uses it for band practice. He's got a band, they've got a little kind of a bit up one end, and they've got a log burner in there, and it's all waterproof. And when I was there at the birthday, I was eyeing up thinking, has this got possibilities here? So when I thought about being a Spring Fling, I talked to Carolyn and Ken about it, and they were absolutely delighted and more than happy to help me out. So I then set up an next studio. Now, this is again pictures stuck together, so it's warped a bit at the outside, but I'm standing down one end and you can see, so it's a nice space here. It was a lovely sort of space, and what I did was, it's just you can't see here, but just behind this sofa there's a nice wood burner stove, which was just fantastic because there was a couple of really cold wet days, and I getting that going there really threw out the heat. It was lovely. We had little chairs sitting down, and we've got all this space, and so I was able to put up some of my favourite photos, all printed up large into A2 frames. I put up other photo shoots that I've been involved with. There you can see the £100 voucher for £10 event. And I had up the top end here. Oh, there I am talking you through it, and I'm not even showing you the picture. Okay, back here. This is the picture of the hall. And what I was saying is pictures up on the right here, framed ones, other pictures, comfy places to sit, photo studio. And then what I did was I did demonstrations, and I linked the camera up to the laptop. And like I did with when I was shooting Maria, I had another screen so that people could watch what was going on. And actually, what was kind of interesting was on I got to the end of Saturday and I hadn't sold a single voucher. And I really thought, it wasn't just that I hadn't sold any, but there hadn't been the slightest sniff of interest. Nobody had even vaguely inquired for a friend. And I thought, there's no, I'll give up. And then that evening, when I was sitting down to dinner, chatting with Maggie about how we talk about how our days had gone, and I was saying about it. And then it suddenly occurred to me that actually, maybe I wasn't presenting right. I think I was so scared of coming across as like a sleazy second-hand car salesman. It's extraordinarily difficult when you're trying to sell yourself. If you're not a natural salesman, most artists hate the bit where you've got to ask for money. And I was so scared of sort of coming across like a feeling that people were going to be having this idea rammed down their throats that I was apologetic in the way that I presented it. So what I would do is I'd do the photo demonstration when there was a group of people there, and then at the end I'd say, and if you're interested, but it's not really important, but there's a special offer down there, voucher, you can get £100 voucher for £10, but only if you're really interested, and I wouldn't really worry about it. That kind of thing, it's a bit. And so what I did by presenting it like that was I set up a mindset which said it's not important, so nobody bothered asking me about it. So I thought, well, okay, I'll try this differently. So the following day, I thought, at the end of the demonstrations, I thought I more confidently just said, if you happen to find this interesting, if you would like to, if you would like a photo shoot yourself, I've got a special offer, Spring Fling only, where you can buy a £100 voucher to put towards a photo shoot for only £10. All the details are over there on that table, but I'm happy to talk to you. Come and have a chat if you're interested. And I sold several of them. And the following day, on the third day, on the Monday, I sold several more. And it was a real eye-opener to me that just the way I presented the offer, because you tend to think, well, the offer's there, they're interested, they're not. But no, actually the way you present it makes all the difference. So having realised then that actually there was a way of doing this, I decided I was going to do Spring Fling again this year, and Carolyn and Ken were quite happy for me to use this space again. And everything was all set up for it. And then COVID-19 hit. And Spring Fling got postponed. And basically what happened is Spring Fling was rescheduled. So as you can see here, what I've got for this Spring Fling special, sitting just down here on the right of your screen, this is the official Spring Fling rescheduled, where Spring Fling now became autumn. It kept the same branding because that's the one that's known. And all this week, if you go to the Spring Fling website, spring-fling.co.uk, what I'll do, I'll stick some links in the comments or the description sentence at the end of this. With various links that you can just click on and go there. But on the Spring Fling website, you've now got enhanced pages. People have put demo videos up. You can have like a kind of pretty good Spring Fling experience online from yesterday, the 5th of October, through to next Monday, the 12th of October. This is all up online on the Spring Fling website. Now, there are also going to be workshops. I'm running a workshop later in this week, which you can just see little bits of information here, and I'll come on and talk about that in a moment. My wife is also in it. Look out for the other Ayres on there, Maggie Ayres. So you can go and check out her work. And so I would really recommend going. If you've not, the disadvantage of this whole COVID thing, obviously, is the fact that everybody's in lockdown. There's restrictions ongoing. There's very few studios that are actually open that are able to, because a lot of studios are in people's houses, or too closely attached to the house. Some have extra ones. I think it might be a handful of studios who are opening up, but most are closed. And of course that ruins a lot of the personal one-to-one experience. But the advantage is, because everybody's sort of up their game with their online, now means it is online. So it doesn't matter if you're in Pennsylvania, or you're down in southern England, or you're in India, or you're in the kitchen next door. You can now go online and visit all these studios and find out more about these artists. And there's a huge range of people, from potters and weavers and sculptors and artists and photographers, and there's so much to explore, and it's all there just at your fingertips. So obviously not just now because you're watching this, but once this is over, go to spring-fling.co.uk and have a good nosy round, and I'm sure you will find some amazing artists that will lighten up your experiences. Right. Okay, so in a minute I'm going to talk about the workshop, and then we'll move on to the critique section. But workshop before that, I'll just flip over and I will just see if we have any more comments in the comment section. Got a couple more. Maya, hello from Jerusalem. Hi Maya, glad you could make it along. Stacey, Maggie's not far, whereas I'm across the vast ocean. One day I hope to travel to your side of the planet. Spoke to my friend about travelling to Italy, but would really love to see Ireland and Scotland because of the scenery. Well, you get amazing scenery in Italy for sure, but you do get amazing scenery in Scotland too. Would definitely recommend it. And Stacey's also talking about Doylestown has an art fair where people also sell paintings and craft items. Cool. Right. Okay, let me just flip this, see whether we have anything else kicking about, and there we go. Okay, right. Ooh, where am I? Nope. Okay. Got to be careful that I can find the right the right space, the right pages for when I need to come back. So, our Spring Fling has come in. Great to hear more about your Spring Fling experience, Kim. Good stuff. Thank you. Right. So, what I want to talk a little bit about now is, well, basically, I just want to briefly run through the photography workshop. So, as I said, last year I did a setup where I sort of showed people around. I showed people different lighting effects. Now, actually, on the Spring Fling website, if you go to the Kim Ayres page on the Spring Fling website, and again, I will put the link in there somewhere afterwards, I've got a little video of taking you through lighting setups. Now, for all you budding photographers who are watching this, I would seriously recommend going and watching it. It's not a long video, but what I do is I take you through what happens when you move a light around. So I've got my model that year. It's the photos that I used last year with my model was Holly, and I show what happens when you light her from the front, when you light her from the side, when you then light her from the side and use a reflector, when you light from behind. So it really does give you quite a good sense of how lighting works. So that video is actually currently sitting right now on the Kim Ayres page on the Spring Fling website. But the other thing that I've wanted to talk to you about is this notion of a photography workshop, and it's absolutely free. Now, over the 4 days, you can see here from Thursday evening, Friday, Saturday and Sunday evenings, I'm going to be running a short series of workshops. 8 p.m. UK time. So essentially it's going to be split up into 3 parts. So the first part, I'm going to be talking about the notion of taking a household object and looking at how you can photograph it in different ways. So you can take a mug and you can do this with it or that with it or the other with it, and how you photograph it starts to change your perception of what it is. And you can do that with any household item. So I'll be taking a particular household item, I'll be running it through what I can do with it, but hopefully then inspiring you and asking you to go away, find a similar household or your own household item and take photos of it. And then, if you want to, you can then submit those images, and all the details will be given at the time, where to put that. And so I'll set that challenge to go away and photograph your own items. Then on Friday, I'll take a look through any photos that have been put in, give it a little bit of feedback, and then I'm going to talk about the notion of line and form and certain kind of compositional techniques with the theme of doors and windows. So it can either be views from your door or window, or it can be pictures of your doors or windows, or pictures through your doors and windows. But it's that notion of it's either you can use them as a frame, or you can, or views. So it's sort of slightly more landscape or shape, form, texture. Not texture, shape and form and line really is what it's about. So I'll show you some photos that I'm doing, and then I will set you the challenge. On Saturday, we'll review any photos that anybody decides that they want to submit. And then I'm going to talk about portraiture and selfies. So either you can take a photo of somebody else in your household, or if nobody else in the household wants you to, you can take photos of yourself. And I'm going to talk through different aspects of portraiture, and again, set the challenge for you to take a photo and then submit it. And then on the Sunday, I'll give feedback. And then what I will also do is I will pick an overall winner. The person who submits from any of the categories, photo that I feel, for whatever criteria I feel like at the time, but basically impresses me on whatever level, will win a free 1-to-1 online session, mentoring session. So basically we can sit down, we can talk specifically for you on any particular topic that's where you're struggling with your photography, or you would like to know something. I'm yours for the hour. So the idea with this being household item, doors and windows, portraits or selfies, is that it doesn't matter what conditions you're in terms of lockdown or social isolation. you can take part. You can use any kind of photographic thing. You know, if you don't have to have a fancy DSLR for this, you can use your phone, you can use your tablet, you can use a point and shoot, or if you do have a fancy DSLR, you can use that too. But the point is, all you really need is something that can take a photo, because this isn't about this workshop isn't about how to operate a camera. It's about how to be creative with your camera, how to understand how to look through your camera to create interesting stories and ideas and discover interesting things. So ages 13 up. I could probably go younger, except for the fact that because this is going to be happening on Facebook Live via the Spring Fling page. So if you go to, it's facebook.com Spring Fling Open Studios. You could just see just here the bottom one. That the Kim Ayres photography. That's my Facebook page. Spring Fling Open Studios. That's the Spring Fling page. If you go there, it will be coming out of there. There's also, again, I will stick in a link when I put in the bunch of links. There's also an event page for this workshop, which you can set up for as well, register with. So, if you're really genuinely interested in exploring your photography, in looking for little ways to advance it, I would really recommend coming on it. Like I say, you don't have to have a fancy camera for this. It's for people at any skill level, because but take part. It's the idea of doing it, which is really going to be, it's all the bits that go wrong. For those who've sort of come here regularly, and it's a bit of a repeat, but it's worth saying again, and for those who haven't been here before, but basically, it's the mistakes that you make is where you learn. You don't tend to learn from what goes right. You get all the praise for what goes right, but you learn from the things that go wrong. So you take the photos and you go, oh my God, that's awful. What can I do differently? And because the moment you start thinking, what can I do differently? You are being creative. You are setting your mind going. And that's part of the learning process. So don't feel frustrated, don't feel it's not for you, don't feel intimidated by it. Just join it. And the other thing, join in, and even if you don't want to post the photos, that's okay. But I would still say have a go, have a bit of fun. I think you will find it useful. But likewise, again, you're not limited to Southwest Scotland here. You can be anywhere in the world, take part. Also, if you happen to have any friends who are enthusiastic amateur photographers and what have you, let them know about it as well. There's these kind of little opportunities aren't always available, so make the most of it. Tell your friends about it. If you find the event page, share it with anybody you happen to know. The more the merrier, basically. So that's the workshop that's going to be coming up, so I hope you will join me on that. Right. Okay, so we're now on to the critique section. I will just say, although this is Spring Fling, I'm promoting that. I would just say, if you're finding any of this interesting, you find it rewarding, then if you go to buymeacoffee.com, and it's buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. You can leave a wee contribution towards these podcasts. It's not compulsory, but it is always appreciated. Okay, so the critique section. This is a point whereby people can send in images or ask questions and get a bit of feedback, a little bit of insight to help move that photography forward. So, got a few little things to talk about this evening. So what shall we deal with first? I think we'll start with Paul. And actually, I will just start with one other thing with Paul, in fact, just for a bit of fun, was those who were watching, I think it was last week, Paul submitted an image of Sandy Hills. And there's this little kind of is in his world, but he's leaning away from the other two. I mean, you could crop any of these and it would just seem like you would swear they were a solo musician. It looks like 3 solo musicians rather than a band playing, but I'm sure, you know, there must have been a band kind of going. The lack of, that space, 2 on one side, 1 on the other, it does kind of feel uneven. And I think you're right. I think either you go in and you concentrate on one musician, or you move around and you try and get them lined up so that they're all in the shot but without really gaps behind. You know, I mean, if you were off to the left of the fiddle player and then looking back down among them, you would have him in the foreground, but if you just got the angle right, you still want to be able to clearly see the bass player and the guitarist. And on top of that, judging from the way the shadows are pointing, you'd have got quite a nice bit of backlight as well, because it looks like the sun would have then been behind them and you would have got quite a nice little halo effect coming from them. That in itself would have then also helped separate them out from the background. So really, I think with something like this, positioning is everything. And it's worth moving around. Now, I don't know what other obstacles were about. You know, maybe there was, you know, somebody standing there right where you want to be. That can always be frustrating. But if we're talking about trying to really get the most out of them, I think you want to try, if you could get them lined up. So just imagine coming in from the side and then you've got them layered back. And then you've got the sort of a slight backlight behind them coming from the sunshine, you know, giving them a little bit of halo, separating them out from the background. I think at that point you would have got much more of a sense of the 3 of them together rather than the 3 of them almost sort of sitting individually, happening to occupy the same space. And it would have solved your background problem at the same time. Possibly, of course, I don't know what's actually in the background the other side. There could have been some bright pink and yellow stripy bus or something, which obviously would have grabbed all the attention instead. But alternatively, there's the getting down low, there's the moving around, there's the sort of shooting along the length of a guitar. A little bit depends how much zoom you've got. Sometimes, you know, zooming in close detail can make things interesting. So, you know, it's not to say you haven't captured, you know, we can see it's street musicians, but if you're talking about wanting to have that extra level of how does it move from just being a documentary photo of what I've got into something a bit more artistically, you know, ooh, what's going on here, then I think moving the angle is the thing that would have made all the difference. So I hope you found that useful, Paul. That's really where I would have come from with that one. Okay. So, let's... Stacey says, interesting. I'm glad, Stacey. Thank you. Okay, what else have we got here then? So, what I'll talk about now is... okay, let's go VG. Now, VG actually sent me something, said, I know it's too late to submit a photo for critique section. Never too late for you, VG. Though, yes, it was quite late in the afternoon. So I've not had a lot of chance to get to things. Now, she says she saw Mandy's question. Okay, well, I'll come on to Mandy's in a bit. That's about the ethical notions of editing an image in a particular way. But it's playing around, is how much you're altering an image. And basically, what VG did was she took a particular image and then she took some... the image was of... Okay, let's find the image. That's probably the easiest thing to do here. I can talk for ages about it, but unless you're actually seeing it. Where are we? So, this is the photo. It's a particular bridge. It's a rail bridge, but it opens up to allow the boats to go through. And then what VG did was she played around with sticking some other boats. So she took some boats, you can see the boats from the foreground here, and then put them in the background there. And she's playing. I mean, what VG says is, if you zoom in, you will find the boat and bridge ratio is not correct. More than that, the boats are botched up. I took the photos from another location. But basically, in essence, what Vigi's looking for here is a couple of... She knows that doesn't look right, but is looking for a couple of tips and tricks on how to, where you start with something like this. And there's just... Now, you can talk for hours about these kind of things. I'm just going to mention two particular things, Vigi, which I think would be useful. The first is you're right, you've noticed the scale isn't right. The fact is those boats, you put that on the other side of the bridge here, are just too big for what they would be. At that scale, they kind of need to be in the foreground. And the other thing is of course, the angle isn't quite right as well. From where you're standing, you're looking down on this, but you're not looking, whereas your original, in fact, actually, if you show, where were we? If we were here, although you've got a bit of height when you're looking at these boats here, you are at a lower angle. And what this brings me back to, or brings me round to, is the fact that if you are going to be compositing, as in taking one element from one photo and placing it into another, it's got to match up on a number of levels. One of the levels it has to match up on is in scale. Another level it's got to match up on is angle, natural angle from which you will be looking at. And the third thing it's got to match up with is light angle. And if you look here, if we look at these a bit more close up, the lighting isn't quite the same as the light that's here. It's close, but it's not quite close enough for where the light and the shadow is falling. And so that makes it feel sort of slightly false as well. I think there's one other thing here, which is there's a blue cast to this, which is obviously coming from, essentially the colour cast of your photo here is slightly different from the colour cast here. So that's not quite... So colour, light, angle, and scale have all got to be taken into consideration if you want to be able to place something inside another photo without it immediately jarring and without you immediately feeling, oh, that looks wrong. Because in the end, the main thing of any photo is you want people to be able to absorb into the photo, find it interesting, but the minute they start going, oh, what's that bit? They're no longer in the picture. They are wondering about it. It's a bit like when you're watching a movie or something and something's not quite right. The set wobbles when somebody slammed the door, or somebody's out of character, or the sound suddenly doesn't match up with the visuals. You stop being in the movie and you suddenly become aware of sitting there watching the movie. You're no longer involved in it. And it's the same thing with editing. And if you don't get the editing right, people stop looking at getting the move of the picture and instead start looking at the edits. So that was just a quick thing with that, really, VG. I thought it's just understanding that whatever's going to be put in has to match, and to get it to match, you've got to get the colour and the light and the angles and the scale all there. And it's not easy. It gets easier with practice, like all these things. The people who manage to do this almost seamlessly have been doing it a lot. It's like anything, you don't become a great guitarist without practicing the guitar a lot. The more you do it, the better you get at it. But those are the main key things that you need to remember if you're wanting to do more of this. So I hope that helps. Right. Okay. Paul's come in. Useful advice, etc. I'm glad of that, Paul. Thank you. Right. Okay. Next, I'm going to talk to Alison. Okay. So Alison went to Tuscany and she took a couple of photos, but it's this one that we want to talk about. She's not processed it, but a Tuscan landscape. I was looking. I was even looking to make it the front of my photo book, but something is out of balance. Not sure what. So yeah, first glance you go, wow, beautiful Tuscan landscape, and it's rich greens and blues and those amazing trees and the villa up on the mound, and yeah, absolutely drawn to it. And the landscape's a little bit dappled with it's a little bit in shade you know, sort of the clouds are casting a bit of shade here, but the villa at the top is lit up. But yeah, the balance is a tricky one. Let's just open this in Photoshop for a moment, because of course the first thing you want to do is crop it, get the right kind of crop, and so. But where do you know, if you kind of go rule of thirds-ish, you know, you have more foreground, you know, so your villa, which is your main bit, which you're wanting in there. Maybe you're wanting to come in a little bit because you're also interested in these trees. Make that sort of roughly like that. Well, then it feels like there's an awful lot of grass in the foreground, which isn't really particularly contributing to the story. The story's not really about the field in the foreground. If we crop it the other way, and sort of more where your rule of thirds is kind of keeping the sky, you know, so the landscape is coming along there. Let's just do something like that. Well, now there feels like there's a whole lot of sky, which isn't really doing much either. So it's, yeah, so you can play around with that a little bit. I mean, to be honest, I think probably with this kind of stuff you're as well going panoramic, you know, because really where all the interest is in this section in the middle, which is, no, okay, maybe we don't need, you know, you could, if you want, depending on how much you want to crop in, you could do something like that. Maybe even bring that one up a little bit more, something like that. Even bring that down a touch more. And then I think, you know, your crop with this, that's really where your story is. Your story, the road with the trees, it comes round here, it swings round to the left and heads up towards the villa. But then I think there's also a thing with the colour, which, although I mean it's a rich Tuscan thing, I think almost because the sun's sort of partially faded, I don't think you're getting the richness of colour out of it. I mean, if I just kind of go to, oh, wasn't meaning to do that. Go to Camera Raw, and let's just first of all let's just auto that. Yeah, okay, that's kind of interesting. So let's take down the highlights a little bit, boost the shadows up a little bit. Maybe create a little bit of clarity, a little bit more. But we can either go saturation or vibrance. I'm going to take the vibrance and I'm going to move that up a little bit to the right. Now, how far you move this is, of course, entirely up to you. You know, some people's wonderful colour will be somebody else's. Oh my God, that's gone too far. You know, if we take it over there, it's now quite sickly. Take it down there, we've got black and white. But you can sort of nudge up just a little bit. You know, so. Again, personal taste here, but something like that. I mean, if you're talking Tuscan, you're talking, you know, you're wanting sort of slightly richer colours, I think. So that kind of gives you something. But I think really, though, part of the problem that you've got here in terms of balance is where your lines are leading you to or not leading you to. Although we know we can follow, the road comes up to the right, it swings round and then comes back to the villa. The villa actually isn't that prominent. We could see it's up there, but it's actually, it looks like the main villa's probably even behind. This is maybe an outbuilding. And then we've got, whether that's vineyard or some kind of tree. I have no idea what kind of trees they are. Probably somebody else will know. Anyway, we have the little orchard bit in the foreground. But we've got all these strong verticals of the trees, and that's, you know, they're great, they're lovely shaped trees, but they go boom, 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 and they come up a little bit and they sort of sweep you off to the right. So our sort of directional line as such, just turn that to a pencil tool for the moment, is, let's turn that white so you can see a bit more clearly, it's taking us up that way. You know, we've got a curve of the road comes up there and we start sort of pointing off in that direction, which is taking us away from this, which is kind of, but then this isn't necessarily big enough and strong. I mean, all these trees here, they're strong verticals. They're very, very bold shapes. Very strong. They're dark against the lighter background. So they become the dominant force in this photo. When you look at this image, the first thing you really see is the, you know, it's like that trick. I mean, if I just do that bit where you blur it and flip it. Some of you will have seen me do this kind of thing before, but if we Gaussian blur quite strongly and then rotate image adjust. Where's the rotate button gone? Okay, let's transform. Yeah, flip 180 degrees. What do you see? And what you see is, okay, we've got a green patch here, we've got a blue patch here, and these strong dark lines. Do you see the villa? No, you don't. So it's not standing out enough. But if we go back to here, you know, that's kind of the point of the photo. So if you're talking really about your balance, I kind of think that's where the problem lies, Alison, is that you know, if the villa is really what it's about, or the villa in the landscape is kind of, it's not just that in the landscape, it's those trees just become so dominant that they kind of override everything else, and that's, I think, what's really throwing your balance out. Now, you know, you can set about maybe photoshopping a few of them out, I don't know, but that's not, I think you then ruin part of, you know, that lovely avenue of trees is what's you know, it's a lovely thing. But again, maybe a change of position, maybe if you moved round to the left so that let's just pull that back to the original for a moment. Perhaps if you were sort of standing somewhere around here, or maybe just the other side, maybe even, you know, roughly where that telegraph pole is, and you were looking up and you had the trees all running down to your right, and you can see the road, but you've also got the villa up on the left. It's difficult to know unless you're standing there, but yeah, moving around and finding the right angle, because the problem is that you've got these, whilst the trees are interesting, because they're boom, 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 right across the middle of the picture, that's what's taking up all of your attention, and it's, you know, it's kind of almost creating a barrier between you and the villa beyond. So that's where I think you're probably struggling with the balance. So I hope hope that makes sense. Okay. Well, thank you for sending me that, Alison. Right, okay. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about is from Mandy. Actually, what's Stacey saying? I really like that crop with seeing the trees and the house in the foreground, plus amping the colours. Right, okay. I definitely think the colours needed a little bit more with that. So, yes. Okay, so now, the last one I want to talk about here is Mandy. So Mandy says, hi Kim, I had a go at landscape photography, something I tend to shy away from. My question is concerning how far should editing go to make an image aesthetically pleasing, apart from the usual dodging and burning. Okay, so let's show you the house. Where are we? Let's click there, and let's find that. Okay, so this is the picture Mandy put up. Now, she's also sent me the original, pre-edited, or, you know, before editing. So this is a place called the Dune, which is the other side of Kakubri, roughly about sort of 15 miles from here. It's a lovely wee space. What I really like, actually, when you look at the original, excuse me, is much more typical kind of Scottish day. It's dull, it's overcast, it's a bit grim, really. It's obviously just stopped raining. There's a bit of a gap in the rain there. The light isn't fantastic. At this point, a lot of people would just sort of give up or not even bother taking their camera out of the bag. But what Mandy has done is she's black and whited it and really played with the contrast and created something, I think, much more interesting. The texture in those clouds, this is drama. You know, such a far cry from this is a dull day, can we get back in the car? And this is, wow, you know, there's a dramatic sense of that. And the black and white really helps with that, because now we're concentrating on tones and form, rather than just looking at it as a real picture of a dull day down at a dull wet day down at the beach. But to go back to Mandy's question, so apart from the usual dodging and burning, would it be ethical to completely remove the house that sits to the right of my image in the woodland? So if we look up here, what we can see is there's a house up in the right hand corner. And she goes on to say, or should I just leave it? I would like to print this image for myself, so I may just remove it. But should ever a time come that somebody wants a print, where would I stand? Would I leave it in? This is just something I wondered while editing this image. Now, she sent me the original. I was going to sort of maybe play around with a few edits, but to be honest, the editing of this isn't, you know, in terms of the look that you're going for, I don't really think, you know, you've decided that you want this sort of strong black and white thing. I think it's a powerful look. 5 minutes of me editing on the screen isn't going to necessarily give you anything else. I mean, what I might say is bring a little bit more detail out of the shadows, because what there is over here, ignore that house for the moment, but there is texture in these trees, which I must admit I quite like. And I think a little bit more dodging and burning, so a little bit of dodge on the tops of the trees here will help lighten the tips and give you a little bit more texture in that area, rather than it just being, otherwise it's just going to be sort of too dominant black. And the other thing to be aware of is when you come to print it, quite often these things print out just a little bit darker than they appear on screen as well. So that would actually become a large sort of lump of black, which wouldn't particularly be doing the favours for your photo, would be undermining what you've already achieved here. But that aside, other than that, that's the only thing that I would say about the editing in terms of contrast. The interesting bit, though, is this question: what about this house? This house, she doesn't like the look of. Should it be there? Is there? And she, as Mandy says, you know, well, if she's going to print it for herself, it doesn't matter. She'll happily remove it. But what if somebody else wants this picture? Is there something ethically wrong in removing the bit that you feel is upsetting the balance of the photo that you've created? Now, you can argue it many different ways. And in the end, part of it, Mandy, will come down to how you feel about it. But if you're asking me, I would say, move it, remove it. I don't see a problem with that. And I'm going to tell you, but it's not just enough for me to say that, you know, yes or no. You need to know why. The fact is that what you've done here is you've set this up as an artistic photo. You're not doing it as a documentary photo. Okay? And there's a big difference. Well, there is in my mind, at least. Now, in a way, I suppose the whole philosophy of photography is being debated on here. There are the biggest piece of nonsense ever said about photography is the camera never lies. Total nonsense. The camera never tells the truth. The camera is incapable of telling the truth as we perceive it. The camera's not capturing 3 dimensions, it's 2. It's not capturing 4 dimensions, it's not capturing time, it's not capturing smell, it's not capturing feel, it's not capturing sound. When we're standing on the edge of that beach, we're smelling the salt in the air, we're feeling the breeze against our face, we're hearing the dog barking or the cows mooing or the cars going past in the distance, we're hearing the sea lapping, we're feeling the sand squidging under our feet, especially the wet sand. And there's this whole entire experience which we're never going to be able to fully capture in 2 dimensions. But, of course, obviously what we're trying to do is evoke some of these memories and feelings in the viewer. Now, what you've already done with this, Mandy, is you've turned it to black and white. This photo, let me zoom back out so we know exactly what we're talking about here. This photo is not the same as this photo. This photo I recognise as a reflection of the kind of day where I've been out to the beach and it's been dull and overcast, and you sort of got out of the car, walked around for a bit, and then it started spitting with rain again, and you've gone back and sat in the car to eat your sandwiches. I recognise that kind of thing. But, do I want to be reminded of that? Not particularly. This is a much more dramatic photo. You've made it dramatic by the way you've edited it. You've moved away from recording it as it is into a work of art. You are being an artist with it. You are trying to convey some kind of message or mood, and you have made alterations within it to enhance that message or mood that you're doing. Now, the very quick, easy way, if you really feel uncomfortable about it, is to just crop in that side a little bit more. If you crop in from the right, an inch, you've cropped out the thing and it's still real. But if that throws your balance out, if you've decided you want these lines and these proportions exactly the way they are for that reason, then why not remove it? Now, I suppose part of this, where I come from, my background is, my father is an artist. Traditional landscapes in oils and watercolours. If you want to look up another Ayres, my wife is an artist, Maggie Ayres, look up her work. Her work is abstract. My father is much more traditional representational, Donald Ayres. So look up Donald Ayres, you can find pictures that he does. He's a landscape artist, and I grew up with my dad painting landscapes. And he didn't make up the landscapes as such, he painted views that people knew. He painted mountains that people were aware of. He painted beaches or bays or woodlands or whatever that people have walked past and seen views of. But he always used to say he never painted what was actually there. He said he painted your memory of it. So he wouldn't put the telegraph pylons in. He wouldn't put the cow pats in. He wouldn't have the midges and the mosquitoes in. He would make sure it was on a nice warm sunny day rather than an overcast, dull, wet, miserable day. He would paint the best version of it so that when you looked at it, it evoked all your favourite memories of the place. And he would very often, you say, oh, I kind of remember that path there. And he'd say, no, that path isn't actually there. That path is over there. Or we put in a gatepost somewhere. But he would he would use compositional techniques of leading lines, of using, a path to draw you into the image. But he would remove the path. He would change the angle of the path to get your eye to travel to the point that you wanted. And he never saw any problem in that, because what he was doing was he was creating something that you wanted to have on your wall. Because when you looked at it on your wall, you got that nice, warm, bubbly feeling of kind of what it remembered to be like when you were there. And that is... An artist has been doing that since day one. I mean, you look at the rock art of, Neolithic cave, or no, is it Neolithic? Which one's the old one? Can't remember. Paleolithic, Neolithic. Anyway, whichever. The old stone cave paintings, where you get these credible paintings of bison and antelope and what have you. They're not exact, but they're not kids' drawings. They're full of incredible power. They're representing ideas of what's there. And the whole history of painting and art is about conveying story and mood and feeling. And how you get that across is what we are all chasing. How many times have you heard me say over the last 27 weeks, where's the story in this photo? once you understand the story you're telling, then how you edit it, where you crop it, what you do with the colours, what you remove, what you add in, are all about enhancing that story so that the viewer picks up on what you are trying to communicate. And what you are trying to communicate in this picture, Mandy, that feeling of the drama of where you can feel it's not just a dull day, it's now a dramatic day. The storm is brewing, or the storm is passing, and we're standing there and we're feeling the anticipation of the weather rather than the disappointment of the weather, which is mostly what we tend to have on days like, in your original photo, that's the photo that conveys the disappointment of the weather. We thought we'd go down to the beach and we took the buckets and spades, and that's what we were, so we got back in the car and ate our sandwiches and had our flask of soup and sort of then went home again. But this is the anticipation of something exciting. Now, if you feel at that point that house gets in the way, then get rid of it. Crop it in if you really feel like you don't want to be lying as such. But it's not lying, it's storytelling. You're already lying, if you want to put it that way, because it didn't look this dramatic. It looked disappointingly dull. And now this isn't disappointingly dull. This is anticipatingly dramatic. So where do you draw the line on this, You draw the line in what works and what doesn't work. Now, there is a difference if you remove that house and then you were trying to sort of, do some legal thing and say, oh, that house was built illegally on that land. Look, here's a photo where it doesn't exist. And then suddenly somebody's put it there. Fine, but you're not doing that. You're creating something which is going to be printed out and put on a wall. Or is going to be used as a desktop background on your screen, or is going to be printed as a t-shirt, or made into a jigsaw puzzle or a mouse mat or whatever else you want to do with it. But you've got an image that you're creating, a mood to convey that mood. And if the house gets in the way of that, get rid of it. If the stone got in the way of it, get rid of it. You saw earlier Paul had removed the person walking in the background. I don't see any problem with that. If you wanted to put something in, if you wanted to put a dog running across, then I would talk about the same things that I talked about with VG earlier, which is we'll make sure it's lit from the same direction, that it's the appropriate size, that you've got the right angle on it and everything else for it to be. But again, I don't really see any problem with that either, because what you're doing is you're being an artist. You're not just being a documentarist. And if you go back to actually, I just suddenly remembered, Mandy, the very first photo that you submitted to these podcasts of the woman walking into the river with her dress flowing. What did I do with it except take the bridge that was in the background and lower it? Because I felt that there was too much gap between the top of the woman and where the arch of the bridge was. And I said, so I cut that out and pulled it down to make what felt like, to me at least, a picture that sort of felt more contained within it. Now that was more of a fantasy style picture, so maybe you didn't feel that you didn't worry about it quite so much. But this is a fantasy style picture too. So really, now there will still be diehards out there who might be listening to me who are thinking that I'm talking nonsense and that you mustn't ever do anything like that. In which case, leave a comment. Come back to me next week. Send me the email. Try and convince me otherwise. But for here right now, I would say remove the house if you don't want it. The only other suggestion I would have is really literally bring the texture out of those trees on the right, because I think they will echo that little... When I look here, the texture is echoing the shape of your clouds up here. And I think that to have a lighter, just getting those highlights, echoing light on the dark, echoing the dark on the light over there will just lift that a little bit. But that aside, and just copy and paste or use the clone to the patch tool or something like that, happily remove it. So, hope that's not too controversial. Hope you found that useful, Mandy. And that's pretty much it, I think, for now. But other than to remind you very much about this workshop. come along Thursday evening, 8 p.m. On the Facebook Spring Fling Open Studios. You can see it here. When this is finished, I will copy and paste a bunch of links. The link to the Spring Fling Open Studios website, the link to the event page, but I'll also put a link to the Spring Fling Co UK page and my page on it, and I might even throw in my wife's page for good luck too. Plenty of links to go and follow shortly after this finishes, and if you're watching the YouTube version, again, I'll put it in the description, so just click more. When you get the little bit of writing, click more lower down and you'll find a bunch of links there for where you can go to. So I really hope you will join me on Thursday for the workshop and stick with me. So it's 8 o'clock each evening. Again, if you can't do it live, they will be recorded and the following morning put up on the Spring Fling website. So if you go and visit the Spring Fling website the following morning into the workshops page, you will find recordings of the workshop, and you've still got the rest of the day to play around, get your photos, stick them up on the Facebook group, on the Facebook page, and get some feedback. So that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you on Thursday. If for any reason though you decide not to, then I'll see you next Tuesday, and enjoy the rest of your week. Take care. Bye-bye.